This is a James Poe Artistry Consultant Moment.
The real question here is whether a philosopher or a philosophical debate trumps a spiritual or holy Bible statement. Hi, perceptive readers. Today, I want to share with you one of those same accounts that I did with Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I encourage you to listen to that podcast commentary I did on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, because it's along the same lines of choices people make at times. And sometimes when the choices that are made are so inhumane, so unethical, but it may be some philosophical reason behind why that choice was made. And so for the victors who may agree with it, then they make it seem like that was a right choice, in which it really wasn't. Not according towards maybe an ethical community, people who are highly spiritual. That takes me into what I'm about to talk about now. You know, you haven't seen me mention too much over the years Stargate. Okay, Stargate. And there's no particular reason why I haven't done maybe a commentary on it. It's probably just because I just haven't really gotten to it. See, I told you so much I would do if I keep saying that I had exactly the type of software programs, the type of laptop I want, my writing tools and stuff. See, that's all the special stuff that will really come with, feeling the flow from even the type of tools and equipment that I'm using. So that's just an FYI. Now, with that being said, I don't want to spend as much time on this because there was an episode where the Colonel, Jack O'Neill, was actually being tortured, killed, or what have you, every single time he went to see an evil Goa'uld, you see. Now, those beings, they worship as gods since it's like the beginning of time of even human history. But here's the point. They were able to always live that long because they had this, it may look like a huge, extravagant coffin, but it was called a sarcophagus or something of that nature. And what it did was it brought them back to life, or it rejuvenated them to a strength that, you see, they could live for another, 100 or 1,000 years without having to go into it or what have you. Now, with that being said, after Jack, who's a regular human, was actually, beaten, tortured, killed, from the pain and things of that nature, he was put in that and he was being brought back to life. And this just kept happening because he was trying to get some information out of him. Okay. And so then here was Daniel. Daniel was one of those persons who he was a professor. He was the only one who could really crack codes that nobody even in the world could crack. And so he actually got to one point where he was so sincere in what he was doing, and it was obvious, he was able to go to ascension. That goes to a spiritual plane, which we won't focus there. Here's what I want to tell you, though. This was the dilemma, and I'm going to state clearly something that you heard me say before, but I said it over the course of several different podcasts. But I'm going to tell you, I stand firmly by it. I've even already read some scriptures that you can reference, and so maybe you'll think about them. But see, here's the point. Daniel went to visit Jack O'Neill. He was still in pain, wore out from all the torture. And he knew Daniel had the power to actually release him, to stop his pain, or to stop him from coming back even, from this Gaul torturing him like this. Now, with that being said, in that serious discussion, Daniel started talking about, the things that he had learned, why there's no interference in this way or that way or what have you. Now, I want you to know, if you pay attention to that episode, because I'm sorry, I don't remember the title of the episode. I wasn't paying too much attention when this actually ran across my feed of the title. I just, was recalling this episode. So what happened is, and I want you to know, there really is a philosophy like this. I'm telling you, it's a real one that people adhere to even today. And so there's a focus so much on, believing that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, that you have a lot of even sincere-hearted people who would be like Daniel, who would actually say, I have no right to play God in this way, to do or not do, to interfere or not interfere. In other words, to stay neutral on such a level that atrocities are literally allowed to happen. And see, and that's the reasoning behind it. They're ending up saying, like Daniel was saying, well, if I stop this now, to you, being done to you now, Jack, then what will happen to me down the line? He was basically saying eventually the power could corrupt him as well, and then he'll turn, just like that evil Gaul. Okay? All right? I encourage you to listen to the arguments for and against. And one of the things that I really appreciate that Jack has said, he said to Daniel, basically, if I had that type of authority or power, I would do it for you. See, and I just thought I'd tell you, by near the end of the season of Stargate, Jack had made it all the way up until actually a general, where he ended up being even over the whole base. I'll just tell you that, with his type of thinking. Okay. But with that all being said, Jack said that, and Daniel knew that Jack would have. Now, this is what I want to tell you for the correct view, according to God's word, the Holy Bible, from what I understand. Okay. First, they love to mention people, what Jesus went through, and how once it got to the point where he just was going to do what he knew his mission was to do, his assignment from God to do, that he didn't speak a word. You see, he just went through that course, okay? Went through what was laid out for him to save humankind. And you've heard me talk through some of my commentaries at times over the years, how people through their different belief system, and I won't hop too much on it, harp on it too much, but sometimes they've actually wasn't sure exactly how to worship Jesus. So sometimes they actually felt like even the life course that they took had to imitate Jesus to such a degree that it's like even during certain times of year, they even felt they were supposed to go through the crucifixion even. You see, there are some belief systems today, actually misunderstandings of certain passages where persons literally they're oh my goodness, I don't even want to use some of those terms that came to my mind, but it goes to show you they are not treating themselves or their bodies in the way that God would want them. It's self-inflicting pain, self-harm. And yet they actually do that, saying that's part of their worship. Okay. So I'm not going to focus in that way. That's just another FYI for you. Because I want to really focus on if you have the authority, or in this case, it was being described a godlike power to save Jack O'Neill's life, to free him, you see, from going through that barbaric treatment he was receiving from the Gaul to get information out of him. And Jack wouldn't do it. And so it's some other stuff that it makes me want to go into it, but I won't. So the thing is, which argument would you agree to? Jack O'Neill's argument or Daniel's argument? Well, this is my take on it now. You know, in my life, I've seen too many excuses coming from people who actually had the authority to do this or that, and yet they have that twinge of conscience all of a sudden when they had the power to do something that would be good and would actually build more of a character of understanding, even in their own heart, mind, and spirit. That's when all of a sudden they just want to go along with everybody else and make it seem like that is more reasonable to do, you see, than to allow atrocities, to allow this bullying, than to do what's right. See, I really believe, according to the scriptures, that when Jesus and especially Paul talked about pursue good, I really believe that when God has Solomon talking about do not hold back good when it's within your power and your hand to do something about it, to give good. See, I also believe when God inspired, even in the 80th Psalms, you know, in that area where he started saying, I call you gods, basically, because you have godlike power of life and death to even make decisions like that. So you already have all this other authority over the people. And God was saying, you better exercise it righteously. So when you're seeing crimes, when you're hearing about crimes, you stop the crime. You see the widow crying at the gate because of being swindled out of her money. See, I'm just using examples. You see the orphan having his bull, where the widow bull was taken away, and the orphan had other stuff taken away as well from these criminals and didn't do nothing about it. God was not happy about that. See, and that's why even Job, when he was going through all his pain and telling God, excuse me, and telling God what he felt about matters, Job was even saying, you know what? You may have some persons like that or corrupt judges that were at the gate that would allow that. But Job was saying he wouldn't allow it. You see? And how did God feel about Job? So that's something I want you to meditate on. You know, we are to pursue good. And if someone is crying out for justice, see, and we're talking sincerely crying out for justice, we don't ignore that. We don't ignore that. You see. And one thing about pursuing good, I tell you what, it seems to be my experience with growth. When you're always pursuing good, then you kind of really have a balance anyway at times of just like, I'm going to just let that person because, do what they're going to do right now. Because see, you understand the situation. You understand. See, there's a difference between crime, like it talks about in Romans chapter 2, and just people not getting along with one another. There's a difference there. And we are not to muddy the two. I talk about identity theft. If a person has their identity stolen, it's like they have been killed. That's serious. That is serious. So, you pursue good. And I tell you what, I really feel if you pay attention to this podcast over the years, when what Daniel said and then what Jack O'Neill was saying, I think you already know what side of the argument I would fall on. Because see, at the same time, I want to make this point clear. And this is what I mean when I talk about spiritual warfare. And you've heard me say this before. There's more going on here than what we won't even get into on this podcast. They just don't want you to know. And see, and you can pick up something that when Daniel was telling Jack that no, he just couldn't whisk him away and have him ascend or let him go free or what have you. And he was telling Jack, you got to do it on your own, Jack, because if you deserve it, you see, then you would have the ability to do it. Okay. What a cruel thing to say, again, from somebody who had the power in their hand to alleviate the situation. Jack had already been through enough pain. And the whole point is what Daniel called himself doing was saying, well, I'm going to teach you how to do this, Jack. Open your mind, do all this stuff, okay? But see, that's the thing about it. As I told you today, see, this was a very well written philosophy, fictional, dramatized event. Okay. There's another word I want to add to that, but I can't think of it. But see, still with that being said, I'm here to tell you today, people, people say life is too short. And that's what I'm talking about. If life is that short, and even if a person, gains, God-like power, as people would say, about what happens, power corrupts and stuff like that. I'm here to tell you today, did you know that, okay, I'll give them this. I'll say persons who have no fear of God, yes, maybe that saying is true. But I'm here to tell you today, the Bible has shown people who do have the fear of God in their heart, no, they don't abuse their authority on that level. You see, it's one thing to be tricked. It's another thing for, persons who keep their relationship God intact. They don't turn like that. And that's one of the reasons why I talk about even with Daniel. It's like Daniel had already shown all his life really what type of being he was, what he pursued. He pursued good in his discipline, that even if he would have saved Jack, You see, it doesn't mean necessarily then he was going to actually in one way be even worse than the Gaul. But see, that's the way they use some of that type of reasoning at times. And really, you can still see also by the end of the season that Daniel appreciated more the importance of using your authority or power in a righteous way, even though some other type of philosophy may talk against it. So this was another type of spiritual comment on, one of the sci-fi episodes of Stargate, the same way that I did on Deep Space Nine. But no, make no mistake about it, I want to encourage you. When you're praying, what a person's doing, they're crying out to God for certain situations. Jesus gave examples of widows even crying out and even saying they want their justice, you see, to judges and stuff. So that's why I want to emphasize to you, if you cry out, if you complain about a situation, it does not mean you're any less intelligent. You see, it does not mean that that you're bad. It doesn't even mean that you're a weak person. I tell you what, in some cases, I mentioned before, why try to impress the very people or very person who's actually trying to bully you by you not saying nothing about it? That's not me. Take care of yourself, the readers.